hear me real good once I turn the mic on. And thanks for joining us here in Carnegie, and also those of you who are joining us at home or wherever you're watching us. I need a report from land use. Mr. Kiley? Mr. Kiley, I'm sorry. Mr. Kiley, I'm sorry.
We're busy.
I'm going too fast.
Could you go to the next item? I'm not quite prepared.
Okay, I will do that. Be happy to do that. We have open discussion as our next item. If, does somebody have open discussion? Councilor Staley.
Yes, I have 3 items that I was going to talk about today. And the first thing I wanted to say is thanks to Albert Schmidt and Jason Bieber for a wonderful tour that they gave us last week of the annexation areas. Councilor Starr and myself were able to go, and I think 2 other council members went on Monday. So we were able to actually see these areas that will be up for annexation in the future. I have had a concern about some of these residents being informed about the task force that we're doing, and I was told that it was going to be too cost prohibitive to mail something out. So I'm going to be printing up 1,500 flyers. I will pay for those myself, and I'm going to those neighborhoods on Saturday to try to inform those people about the task force. So if anyone in this council would like to join me on that endeavor, I would take your help, but I do want to make sure that they're aware of what's coming down the road. Second thing, I had a conversation last week with Matt Tobias from our code enforcement agency, and just wanted to, he and I both agreed that it's April, that we need to put out something to alert homeowners about this new boulevard ordinance. And personally, I will be removing some rose bushes from my boulevard this week to be in compliance with that. But I know one of the hardships in our area, I think, is going to be the rock issue in boulevards. And I've already been talking with some homeowners who have more than 1/4 of their boulevard in rocks, and I do think that we may be running into some difficulties with that. So just wanted to touch on that. And the third thing I wanted to say is that 2 weeks ago, we had the wonderful experience of sitting in on the Board of Equalization. I spent over 13 hours that week. I think some other council members spent more time than that. And I felt it was a fabulous experience. We learned a lot. It went very smoothly. The mayor even commended us the first time we ended the first session. So as we move forward with that, I would just hope that leadership would keep us informed about any dialogue that is happening, you know, for as far as what may be happening next year, and get feedback from all of us right from the get-go, because I thought it went really well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Councilor Erickson.
Thanks. I just want to piggyback on that item too. I've been doing this for, oh goodness, I think this was my 3rd time, and each time I learn a little bit more. And one of the issues that I learned about this time, as we go through the challenge of Lincoln County and trying to equalize all the properties over the same amount of time, how frustrating that is for some of the homeowners, not wanting to be the first one to be equalized, because the longer you wait, the bigger break you get, so to speak. And so we talked about rental property, and you know, I own with my husband some rental property, and one of the frustrating things was that all the rental property wasn't equalized over the same time, and so some of those new developments that were a $14 million development really took a huge hit in their assessment right away. And so I've got a message in to talk with the Secretary of Revenue and discuss how we can possibly make some changes with that and trying to equalize all kinds of classifications at the same time versus kind of willy-nilly piecing it together with that particular type, because we're missing a lot of growth in there. We heard from the Lincoln County Assessor's Office that they are missing a lot of growth when we knock some of those rates down, so to speak. And so we want to have that conversation. This council has put it in their legislative priorities each year that we do support having a different classification for rental property, so it can be studied. And this would be another benefit, that we would be able to assess equally all the rental property across the county versus this neighborhood, this pod, this pod. And so having those conversations, I know that it was vetoed by the governor one year as well. And so certainly important to have that conversation. So just an update that I plan on taking on that particular item as we move forward. So you're all aware of that. And I'll be in conversation about any potential changes. Thank you.
Mr. Kiley.
Thank you. And I just wanted to follow up with that as well, too. And Councilor Staley, hopefully you did get a chance to read the notes that I sent out to you over the weekend. If you had, you did see that that I had included about 5 or 6 points within the notes, that there was just some thoughts about the process, some possibilities going forward, no decisions made about the process whatsoever, and a sincere request that if you have any input on that matter, that we would welcome that. And we are interested in making it improving the process as much as possible, especially our role within the process. So, because we want to do a good job, even though we know that we're not assessors, except for the week of third week of March. So it is difficult. So, you know, what can we do to make sure that the process goes more smoothly? And we're also sensitive also to the county, that we don't wish to really address any of these thoughts about the process until they've completed the Board of Equalization hearings on their end too, because we don't want to imply that we're trying to change anything or encouraging them or pressuring them in any way or sense of the manner. So it's just going forward that we will have further discussions on that item.
And I'm glad you enjoyed the cookies and donuts from the anonymous donor.
I can't say that I ate any of those.
Oh, okay. Councilor Staley.
Well, in response to that, yes, I did get that email, and after I got the email, I did have a conversation with some of our staff, and it helped me to understand things more clearly. But I think sometimes it's out of the get-go, it's nice if we're all included in that information before meetings happen, so that we can all give input out of the get-go. That's just versus hearing about a meeting after it's happened.
There, go ahead.
Oh, first of all, Councilor Staley, you have countless number of meetings yourself, and I'm certainly not offended if I don't know about them ahead of time. And there's most of the meetings I haven't received personal invites from either. So there's no, believe me, there was no intended slight. In fact, the meeting occurred at the request of one of our staff, and so we just simply got together, a few of us, and discussed it. It wasn't anything more than that.
Okay, let's move on then to any other open discussion. Mr. Kiley, would you give a report on land use?
Yes, I do have my land use committee meeting minutes in front of me now. Mr. Jeff Schmidt, with the Chief Planning and Zoning Official, discussed Development Summary Annual Report. He presented the 2016 Sioux Falls Development Summary Report. He spoke about development in regards to annexation, subdivision plats, rezonings, and conditional use permits, construction permits, comparisons to other regional communities, and non-farm wages and salaried workers. Some discussion followed regarding housing permits, sewer able areas, and annexation fees and building permits. And then I just gave a little brief update regarding the annexation task force, which, by the way, will have its first meeting next Tuesday in the main library starting at 2 o'clock.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilor Kiley? Hearing none, we'll move into our agenda items. Who we got? Regan. Mr. Smith, Lincoln, Minnehaha County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan.
Regan Smith, Emergency Manager, Sioux Falls Fire Rescue. I'm here today to update the council and residents on the Lincoln County, Minnehaha County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan. There are 4 phases to emergency management: preparedness, response, recovery, and probably the least discussed is mitigation. Mitigation is the effort to reduce loss of life and property by lessening impact of disasters. We know we can't prevent natural disasters from occurring, but there are measures to lessen the effect on people and property. What's the purpose of the plan? This is a multi-jurisdictional plan that identifies the community hazards and assesses those risks historically faced by Lincoln and Minnehaha counties, including the City of Sioux Falls. That plan incorporates a mitigation strategy that includes goals, objectives, and action steps to help mitigate against and minimize damages imposed by those identified hazards. The plan outlines Lincoln County, Minnehaha County, and its jurisdictions' current mitigation actions and strategies in accordance with the guidance provided to us by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the state of South Dakota. The importance of the plan, why is this important to the City of Sioux Falls? Firstly, the city is required to participate and approve the plan to be eligible for Federal Emergency Management Agency mitigations funds. And probably most importantly, it's the right and prudent thing to do for the city to do as we grow and develop. We want to lessen those effects on disasters to our residents and to our infrastructure. The participating jurisdictions, obviously the counties, the municipalities, and then the rural electrics are big players in this. The Southeast Council of Governments is leading the process and working with the counties and cities. City of Sioux Falls has representatives from Public Works, Planning, and Emergency Management on that team. We look at all the natural hazards that affect the city, primarily flooding, severe winter weather, tornado hazards. We update this plan every year, take a look at what hazards we've had in the last 5 years so we can document that and include that in the plan. A few examples of eligible projects that we look at to include our flood control, drainage projects, potentially generators at critical facilities. As I stated, CCOG, or South Dakota Council of Governments, is facilitating development of the update, and I've given you a link to that existing plan and CCOG staff contacts. Committee meetings are ongoing through the summer. As I said, city staff will be there, and then I'll return to the council to request a resolution supporting that plan in early fall. So, this was just a real quick brief. I want to let the council, the residents know that this is going on, ask for your input, and then eventually ask for your support. I gave you a link to that plan, and we're here to answer any questions as we move through this. With that, I'd open it up.
Questions for Mr. Smith?
All right.
I have maybe one or two.
Okay.
How important is 911 service for this?
For this project?
Yeah.
Or, probably not. This is more long-term things that we can do to mitigate those. I mean, we would look at their critical infrastructure, so if they've got any projects, as far as strengthening their facility from storms or power backup, things like that could be an eligible project.
Okay, so you're looking here for projects that need to be taken
Right.
on.
We look at what are the hazards, and this is not necessarily a response plan or a coordination plan. This is more of a long-term, what are the threats to the city, and what are some potential projects. We integrate all of our flood control, floodplain, those type of things into this. And
So after it's happened, then what do we do? And we
after it's
made the
happened,
initial-
and then looking forward, what are some things we do? We know we have reoccurring damages. What are some projects that we can take to lessen those damage and then save us money down the line?
Okay, got it. I was thinking a little bit differently, and I'm glad you cleared that up.
Yep.
Seeing no other questions, thank you.
All right,
Very good.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it much. Very important part of our city planning that goes on behind the scenes that not many people know about. So thank you very much for everything you do. Okay, this sounds real interesting. Primary disaster mixing system improvements, clean water. Digester. Oh, what did I call it? Disaster. Digester.
I did.
If the digester doesn't work, right. And we've got Mr. Director Mark Cotter here to help us understand what's going on.
Wonderful. Thank you for having us. Today we've got our team here to frame up this next key investment that's going to be made at the wastewater treatment plant, and want to make sure that you are aware that who's all here. Director Tracy Turback, Director of Finance, is here. He's key, obviously, as we plan out our 5-year capital plan and our thoughtful rate models to make sure that as an enterprise fund, that the user fees fully support the investments that are made and the operations. Diane Best is here. She's the Assistant City Attorney. She helps us work with the Bond Council to make sure that this terrific program that we have through the state of South Dakota called the SRF program allows us to access low interest money. It's 1.25%. This particular loan will be for a 10-year term to allow us to spread out those costs to our customers. Trent Lubers is here. If you guys would raise your hand, I'd appreciate it. He's our utility operations manager. He's over all 4 utilities, wastewater being one of them. Mark Perry, he's the wastewater superintendent. Mark Herholzer is the wastewater operations supervisor. Some of you guys have met him as you've gone on the tours. Ryan Johnson's our principal wastewater engineer. Okay. All right, let's get started. We've got a couple of different pieces that we want to take you through. The first, I think we'll just quickly take you through the PowerPoint presentation. This is essentially the PowerPoint presentation that will also show next Tuesday and then the following Tuesday for the first and second readings of the physical loan. But then just based on the feedback we got recently with the sidewalk flow chart, we developed a similar one for this project and also have some visual aids here to take you through wastewater treatment. All right, let's get started. This is the map of the city of Sioux Falls, and I was telling Councilor Kiley right before the meeting, I always think it's a really good compliment to the fathers of this city that many people still don't know where the wastewater treatment facility is located. It was appropriately sited. It's got significant buffer land that the city owns around it, and does a very good job treating this communities and the region's wastewater. This is a little bit of a zoomed in picture of the actual plant, and the project we're going to talk about has been lifted out, and that's the area in green that is called the digester complex. It's essentially 4 large tanks that do a critical function to treat this community's wastewater. Okay, to frame up the project, those 4 large tanks that you see in the picture, those are the digesters. The first key thing that we're going to do, most of these, as you know, this plant was built in the very early 80s. It was spurred off the Clean Water Act of 1972 that really modernized wastewater treatment across the country. And when this plant was sited and ultimately built, these assets were paid 75% with federal dollars, 25% with local dollars. Now that it's going through the end of its useful life, as we either remodel, reconstruct, or expand, those costs now are all bared by the users of the system, and that's why they've created the SRF program to allow municipalities to access low-interest, good-term loans so they can appropriately make these investments. So the first things, you'll see that those covers, they look like they're slightly sunk. They were designed to actually move up and down with the depth of the wastewater in them. They've essentially failed over the years how that function works along with the mixing systems inside there. And so we'll be putting fixed covers on them. We've got a picture of that. We'll also be updating the mixing system inside there to make sure that the biology can appropriately work and maximize that mixing efficiency. We're also looking at 3 of those are what we call primary digesters. 1 is called a secondary digester. With the growth and development of this area, along with more and more opportunity to be talking with high-strength industries, we do expect to bid as an alternate to convert the secondary over to a primary, and we can talk to you more about that. That's just essentially provides us more capacity in our digester complex. Okay. The project itself is $11 million. We've talked about that the term is 10 years for 1.25%. Again, the state has offered us the non-point source funding, so if we agree to reduce our interest rate by 1% and take what we would have normally paid in interest and invest it north into the watershed to make substantial improvements into our watershed, that they agreed to reduce our interest rate from 2.25 down to 1.25. Our schedule is next week would be our first reading, the following week would be our second reading, and then we would go to letting in May and ultimately go into about a 2-year construction. One of the challenges with anytime you're operating an existing plant and you have to make a renovation, you still have to treat the wastewater, and so we laid out, I think, a good construction plan that still allows the operators to treat the wastewater, but set aside critical pieces of infrastructure while those renovations can be made. Okay, non-point source, again, this just provides the amount of dollars will be just short of $560,000 that will go into the watershed up north, and our watershed essentially starts just north of Brookings and goes all the way down to Elk Point. All right, what we'd like to show you today is the flow chart that we've developed, and for those watching, we can certainly scan this and put this online. We also have it for members of the audience if they want to grab a copy. But if you want to just grab that, and we'll start with the side that has the pictures on it. We essentially want to just kind of take you through what these digesters do, and then there's a substantial amount of reading material that's on the back to give you some additional information. But essentially this digester complex, it's kind of the picture that's more central on this flow chart. That's where all the true solids go in the wastewater treatment process. So, you know, as many of you have walked through the complex, that there is the grit chamber. That's where we try to get a lot of the heavy grit out. That's considered untreated wastewater. Once we start going into like primary treatment, fat, soils, and grease float up, heavy solids sink. All those solids immediately go right to the digesters, okay? So that's why you see that black line that goes right to the digesters. The kind of milky-looking water that has essentially a lot of dissolved organics in it, they go to those real large dome structures, and that wastewater makes its way through that biologic process. But one of the things we wanted you to see is that with every step in the treatment process, there's solids that have to be managed. And those solids either get returned to the headworks of the plant to go through the treatment process again, or they go directly to the digesters. There are the primary treatment, secondary treatment, tertiary treatment, filtration, and then ultimately discharge. The digesters themselves are they're located essentially right in the center of the wastewater plant. It is some of the most corrosive environment that exists at the plant. Very high concentrated solids. As the microorganisms go to work in there to treat and stabilize the solids, they give off methane gas that we run through engine generators. And those engine generators produce about 35% of the plant's electricity. So that saves a substantial amount of energy cost for the plant. The byproduct that ultimately, once those solids are stabilized, we're able to apply those solids to farmers' fields once they're stable. And there's just over 1,000 acres in the immediate area that information gets knifed into farmers' fields and allows them to offset some of their fertilizer needs. Okay. These are current wastewater rates since this program has been in our capital plan for several years. Our current user rates support this investment. The digesters, again, as we've talked about, they accept all the solids from the treatment process, so they are absolutely critical in our process. And again, just from a fact sheet standpoint, if you just turn over your fact sheet just for a moment, we can show you a few more things about this project, and then we'd like to kind of take you through what process this has at the plant. That top picture circles the digester complex, so those 4 large tanks. One of those roofs has already been retrofitted, and so if you were to go out there today, you'd see one of the 4 has been done. The next picture down shows how that roof structure gets essentially constructed and is over those respective tanks. The next picture down shows that domed cover. That's the one that's already been constructed. And then one of the things that happened in the original digesters is the mixing systems that were originally designed over time gradually failed, and has really one of our greatest opportunities with this project is to install a good state-of-the-art mixing system so that contact time can really allow that biology to take place and for us to have effective treatment of our solids. Just scanning to see what else may be of interest. The current ones were installed in 1982, so we've got 35 years of service out of these structures. We've invested some money into the roofs just to several years ago to try to extend their life. We are seeing metal fatigue, and we've got corrosion that's beyond repair at this point in time. Our goal is to always provide reliable wastewater service. I think one of the challenges that we always face is really finding what's the timing to make that investment. Because with wastewater, you can't wait for there to be a failure before you make that critical investment. If you wait for there to be a failure, it's usually much too late. We have over time now, with treating Brandon's wastewater, Renner's, and talking to several other cities in the immediate area, we've become a regional provider, and so more and more you'll start to see us making these critical investments to maintain what we currently have, but also look for opportunities to expand the current treatment plant. Again, there's a lot of information on the back that I would encourage you to take a look at your leisure. I think it'd be we'll bring Mark Herholzer up here. He is the operations manager for the wastewater plant. Mark has 10 operators that maintain. There's always 2 operators at the wastewater plant, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every holiday of the year, because wastewater never stops. Mark has a knack for communicating how wastewater works, and so we'll have you take you through the various steps and show you the samples. Mark?
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, council members. Good afternoon to you. So I'm Mark Herholzer, the operations supervisor, and actually what I'm going to do is give you a wastewater plant in a bottle. I'm just going to bring some of these bottles up to you and kind of show you what we do. As Mark said, we have a regional facility out there now. We're starting to serve the communities, not only Sioux Falls, but the outlying areas. And so our plant has become much more critical to the region than it has in the past. But what you actually see when the water comes into the plant is dirty water. It's on average, we bring in about 34,000 pounds of solids every day into the treatment plant that comes in from the communities. And we use a biological process, different methods of changing this raw material into bacteria. So this water actually, although it still looks dirty, is actually part of that transformation process where the bacteria are starting to eat that raw material and starting to stabilize it. What we want to do is we want to take what happens out in the environment and do it in the tanks rather than discharging this out to the Big Sioux River. So we have different stages with different bacteria in there that eat this raw material up as their food. So this is a second stage here of treatment called our trickling filters. If you were to look at that under a microscope, you would see things that look like poppies, maybe little bugs or something like that eating some of this material up. What we do then is, actually it's this bottle here, we take the solids and we thicken it up, okay, and this is still very unstable. If we were to put that out in the environment, it would be what we call a nuisance to the environment. It would stink real bad, bacteria would grow on it, it would get moldy and fungusy. And mind you, we're bringing 32,000 pounds of this in every day. So every day we'd have to find some place to put this raw material, which is an incredible amount of acreage. It would have a decimating effect on the ecology if we put this out there. We thicken those solids up and put them into the digesters where the bugs eat this. And this is actually what the bacteria looks like in the digesters. It's called anaerobic bacteria, which is bacteria that does not like oxygen. They take and eat that material up, and they eat the other bugs up too. So the idea is what nature wants to do out in the environment, whereas bacteria eats and eats and eats, we do that in this tank here. That's the digesters. They stabilize it. So when we're done with it, what we've done is we've turned around and made it a fertilizer. But also we've gotten the benefit of one of the byproducts is methane gas. That's what these bugs produce. That's kind of like propane tank to your barbecue. It has BTU value and energy value, so we run the generators at the plant to make electricity. We also use it for hot water. We heat some of the facilities out there off of what these bugs do. So the digesters, when you look at that, that's what they're doing. We've reduced the solids volume by 68%. These guys eat themselves basically into water, into gas when they're done with it, with just a few remaining inert solids left. As the water continues through the plant, you can see it's starting to get cleaner. We've gone through our biological process and settled all the bacteria out. From your perspective, that looks like pretty clean water. By the time we've got it to the sample point, 88% of all the material has been removed from the treatment process. Most treatment plants in the state would probably discharge that water at that level there, which is a very good quality water. But at our treatment facility, we actually run it through filters. And I don't know if you can see it, it's pretty clean water there. We've removed 98 to 99% of everything that came into the water. So what we do after this is, and we're getting ready to start our disinfection system, is we disinfect the water from May until September. So that way, the water we discharge into the Big Sioux River is safe to swim in. We're not putting any pathogens out there. So in a nutshell, or actually in a bottle, that's what a wastewater plant does. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I told you he has the knack for communicating. So we're here. We did want to share with you, Ryan Johnson guides the scope of work and the work that the consultants do. The project's been designed. We're ready to go to letting. Our next steps would be to finalize the loans with your actions over the course of the next 2 council meetings, and then get the plans ready for bidding, and then ultimately about a 2-year construction. So we've got our team here. We'd love to answer your questions.
Questions, Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks, both of the marks. It's always interesting to watch the water change. Question about those. There are 4 digesters. 3 of them you call primary. 1 of them secondary. The secondary one is the one that has been refurbished already. Is that correct, Mark?
Just the roof. And one of the things that we've contemplated after the mixing system was selected was we're getting more and more requests to treat industrial wastewater. And so what the team had brought forward was, hey, why don't we bid the alternate for putting the mixing system in that one? And ultimately, we would increase our capacity of our complex by about 35% if we converted that one over. And we ultimately know that today's dollars are less than what it would be in the future if we ultimately went that way. It would also give the plant team more flexibility to have an extra tank. And so last year, over the course of the last 2 years, we upfitted that roof, and now we're considering upfitting that secondary into a primary.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand is the 11.56 million loan that we're going after right now is for the 3 primaries?
It would be for the total project, including the alternate. So it would provide the funding so we could make that decision. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then how did we pay, I'm sorry, if I might, just one quick, how do we pay for the roof on that secondary? How was that? Was that just a line item in the budget at some point?
That we actually did with wastewater user fees cash.
Okay.
And so that was a project that was in that 1.3 million range. And so when it went through your CIP, and ultimately that was paid for with user fee cash. Now to actually do the amount of work that's out there and have minimal impact on our customers' rates, and if the last improvement, essentially by the time we were done, these assets would have been working for 40 years. It's appropriate for us to fund these with a loan.
Pretty remarkable how long they've lasted,
Yeah.
considering.
Well, we also, the gentlemen's are not here, but we also have a maintenance team at the plant, and they do a fantastic job.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. And thanks, again, both Marks. Thanks for the report. Great lesson. I would have been tempted to say a quiz at 7 once you were done. But and also thank you for identifying whether it was an aerobic versus an anaerobic process. I mean, a lot of questions on that, but it's the one that I have. So it is basically a retrofit of our existing system. So it's not like we're starting all over and building 4 new digesters.
That's correct.
So the shell of the existing digesters are still good to go.
They are good to go. We will be putting like corrosion inhibitors in there, but one of the points, Counselor, toward the on the back where all the text is, one of the tests that we said is, would it be less costly to just build a new complex, build it offline, and allow those? And that estimate was just under 17 million. So this was a better rate of return for the community, and we've just been very fortunate. This original plant design was very robust. And now we can go in, still basically use that tankage, and just upfit them with new mixing systems and a new roof system.
The tanks are made out of what type of material now?
Concrete.
They are concrete,
Yeah,
and
concrete.
you will be coating those as well.
We'll be coating anything that's exposed to gas.
Sure. And I mean, it is a remarkable process. I did enjoy the tour when I took the tour here a few years back, but then recapturing the byproduct of the process too, because little microbes or bacteria are producing the gas, and you're capturing that methane gas. And it's interesting that it's generating 35% of the plant's electricity in doing so, the equivalent of powering 470 homes a day. So it's a very efficient process. So kudos to all of you and to the operation. I did get kind of a kick out of the reference to the 3 digesters are big enough, holding up to 820,000 gallons, or about 92 tons of solids. And then thank you for putting that in perspective, about 25% larger than an Olympic pool. Now, that doesn't give me a real good mind picture, but it does give you an idea of what the quantity is.
It's big.
That's involved.
Yep.
But, thank you. And this is an aspect of the city's infrastructure that citizens don't even consider, really, because it's not like our streets. When our streets in need of servicing, that's pretty apparent. But in this case, generally, you just flush these things away, and you expect them to go away. And staying ahead of the game here is vitally important for us.
That's right.
So thank you very much. Thanks for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Councilor Staley.
Well, and Mark, you just made a statement that is music to my ears when you said this will have a minimal impact on customers' rates. So thank you for that. About 13 years ago, I took a tour of the wastewater treatment plant as a citizen, took some people with me, and wanted to know if that's still available to our public who's watching, that they could set that up.
Absolutely. We welcome tours, and these are the public's assets, and so we'd love the public to see what their investments are. The public owns it.
So what would they do?
Probably best way is to call Public Works at 367-8600, and we'll make sure that we get those set up for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cotter, I guess one of my questions is the investment in the watershed. it just totally makes sense that we would continue to do that. But we are paying almost $560,000 for that improvement in the watershed. And could you talk a little bit about what those improvements are and how that money would be used? Because really, in the big picture, we're still paying the 2.25%, which is a great rate, but we're still expending the money, and the users of the system are still paying for that. So how will those dollars be used?
Yeah, there's been a number of projects. There was a master plan developed, and then sort of key investments, and they can be anywhere from trying to go right to the polluters that have maybe some larger CAFO units to make sure that those farming operations are protected. Is Andy Berg still here by chance? Andy's not. Let us bring back kind of those next priorities for you. There's many agencies, counselors that work together, and then they prioritize those projects. It could be anything from seeing an eroded bank on the Big Sioux River and strengthening that with riprap to ultimately going up and into a farmer that wants to maybe expand a cattle operation and providing some assistance with their manure handling and things of that nature to make sure that the steps that they're taking are protecting the environment. But we'll let us follow up with some of that information for the council meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Director Cotter, for the presentation. So the equipment we're replacing is 35 years old. Is that correct?
It is.
Life expectancy on the new equipment that will replace that, is it bigger and better and will last for 50 years, or any ideas?
Well, our concrete tankage is, if in general, if that's underwater, it's not exposed to the harmful gases of sewer, so it doesn't denigrate. But one of the things that's greatly improved over the years is when we go to coat something with the corrosion inhibitors, they're so much better than what they were years ago. They used to be, coal tar epoxy. Many of our concrete sewers, they made a concrete pipe. They would spray it with this asphaltic material, and what we found is that just over time, those liners start to fail. Hydrogen sulfide gas gets behind there, and ultimately it starts to just denigrate it. Our corrosion inhibitors now that we put on, the epoxy coatings are so much better. And so, yes, I would say that we'll certainly achieve the same lifespan that we've already gotten, but we certainly expect even more.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. I see no others. We're essentially taking the four digesters. One of them, when you say secondary, what do you mean by secondary? Offline kind of?
It's more of just tankage. I may have Mark Hairholzer come up and just really have him take you through how he uses the secondary tank. Mark?
Yes, what we do is the primary tanks are the three main digesters that do all the work. So when I was illustrating the sample here, that's where all the bacteria is doing the stabilization process. Then what we do is we take it over into the secondary digester, which is basically just a storage tank so that we can actually let it have a place to rest a little bit, just a couple of days, stays in there about 8 days, and then we transfer it out to our biosolids lagoon. And then it's harvested from the biosolids lagoons and taken out to the fields for land application.
Okay, so how are we going to do that now if we have all four of them, all four of them are going to be primary?
Right. So right now, what we're looking at, there's a twofold thought to that question. Is what we're looking is in the future we're going to need more primary digesters to actually do that work because the city's growing, the region's growing, and we're looking for the ability to bring some industries into town. So the main thrust of the digestion process is in the primary digesters. Like retrofitting that secondary digester, and it gives us far more capacity to handle the growth that we're going to see, both as a region, because we're a regional plant, and Sioux Falls. So the economic investment that the city wants to take, these digesters will allow us to pursue that with a little bit more diligence in our thought process. The secondary digester, we won't have that anymore. We'll have a little bit more detention time, how much time we allow each tank to do its work. We'll have a little bit more time in that. So we'll let it have a little longer to do the work, the stabilization in those primary digesters, then transfer it straight out to the lagoons.
Okay. Director, how far are we, how long are we from having to put 1, 2, 3, 4 more digesters in?
Well,
Before we expand again, I mean, is what we're talking about.
And so we're in the midst of, we're doing 2 large master plans right now, one for the wastewater system, and that's today, as we serve the city, there's 900 miles of collection mains that collect all the wastewater and convey it to the treatment plant. So we're about in month 15 of about a 18-month process, and we're doing a look forward on 25 years. We've worked closely with planning to model what the growth is going to be, the amount of wastewater flows will be, and then ultimately we've looked at every aspect of the treatment plant to find out if there's a bottleneck in it and if it needs to be expanded, and ultimately what we think future regulations will be. So I would say by mid to late summer, we're going to come before the council and share the results of that master plan. What we had them do is model out the size of our city will be in 25 years, and then just for planning purposes, model with that same growth, model what it'll be at 50 and 100 years. So we'll know, and we'll be able to show you some of those graphics about the size of our community will be in 25 years. And that's really the challenge that you have with wastewater is you can't wait till the growth comes and then build for it. There are certain aspects of wastewater treatment that's modular, but you have to essentially build before the growth and then wait and then manage through it. So we're right on the end of our master plan. They are, it will really set the growth and development of this area. We also, just with the significance of the decision, we've been working with a national consultant on this plan, and he's wrote us a really good plan. Essentially got us down to we could pick path A or path B. We took a step back and said, let's get one more industry leader, another national consultant for a small investment, had them come in and do a peer review on the master plan, the assumptions and ultimately the course of action. And this peer review consultant really, I think, helped us refine those paths of A and B. And so we feel more confident than ever based on the master plan, but we're probably not going to be ready to bring it before you for the shortest time would be 3 months. It's probably closer to 5. But that will really set up what the next 25 years of wastewater treatment and collection will be for the community.
One more.
Yes.
What's the capacity now?
That's a great question. So when the plant was built, it was rated for 13.7 million gallons per day. We did about a $200,000 study because the team that runs the plant said this is a more robust plant than what it's rated for, and so we put in several sampling points so we could then model really what the capacity of each system is at the plant. Sent a study to the state. They re-rated us up from 13.7 up to 21. We feel like the plant still has more capacity, and so we now with this master plan, we were able to take our modeling to the next level. It's a dynamic model. Ryan Johnson could speak more to this, but we believe that we could write a similar study, which we plan to do here in probably the next 90 days, and submit for this plant to be re-rated up to almost 28 million gallons a day. So what started out in the 80s to be rated for 13.7 million gallons a day, just a few years ago we asked the state to re-rate it up to 21, because today we treat about 17.5 to 18 million gallons of wastewater a day. Now we feel like if we've removed a few bottlenecks over the years, and we think that it could be re-rated up to 28 million gallons a day if the state will support us. But today it's rated at 21 million gallons of wastewater a day.
So in essence, we're going to, with the changes that we're making, we're increasing it by a third.
That specific function of the plant. And I think it's interesting, for those that grew up in a small town that drove by their wastewater lagoon, that process in the environment takes about 180 days to treat wastewater. What happens in a mechanical plant, the same process happens, only we can treat that same wastewater in about 18 hours. And so That's essentially when you talk about the difference between a lagoon system or a mechanical plant, it's just much more efficient and you can process that water through.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Councilor Erickson.
I just have a quick question. With the 11.56 million, remind me how much, I know we kind of talked about this before offline, how much are we paying off before we bond for a new one? I know every year we have new bonds that come up that are mature.
So this, and you'd see this in your budget books, this utility pays off just over $10 million in bonds a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Staley.
We're talking about this explosion in apartment living. We've got limited amounts of residential areas available for people. And I'm wondering, how do 100 apartments compare in usage to 100 homes? If you've got, is that, because I know in a home you have a metered measurement, right? Apartments are,
Ryan, from a
that
zoning
person in an
standpoint, do you
apartment be
wanna
using the
tackle
same,
that? Let me bring Ryan Johnson up from a modeling standpoint and density. He can maybe speak to that. He's our wastewater principal engineer.
Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, good afternoon. Just when an area develops, we look at different utilizations of that area. If it's a high-density residential area or a low-density residential area, typically low-density residential areas where you have quarter acre to third acre to maybe acre lots, we count those on an individual basis. And typically, we look at the densities of those closer to 3.5 to 5 people per household. We apply just the regular flow factor to each one of those. You do the math and you calculate a flow for each one of those. Apartment complexes are a little differently. We still look at the unit count, but typically we're closer to 2.5 to 3 units or people per unit. And so you take about the same amount of flow per person and do the math that way. So density wise, yes, the flow's higher from an apartment complex or apartment area, but per capita, per person, it's about the same.
So do apartment owners, would they be paying, let's say you have 10 homes and each person uses like, let's say 10 consumptions for their sewer rate. Would an apartment and there's 10 apartments there, so that apartment owner is the one who pays, would he be paying the same as the 10 homes would, if you look at it?
Sure, just
They get a different rate as apartment owners?
the bills are sent out on a usage basis. There's a base rate and a usage basis. So it's per 1,000 CCF. It's a measurement of flow, and each unit is charged proportionately. So each unit is charged the same amount based on your actual usage.
Councilor Erickson.
I'm a landlord, and I'll tell you how it works for me. I pay the same rates that I pay at home versus for my rental property. On my rental property, I have a 7-plex on one. It's a double lot. The yard is quite small, and I pay all the water, garbage, sewer for all of my tenants on my property. But since my yard is a little bit smaller than maybe what my home is, my water, in comparison to the size of land that I own at my house, is much higher at my house versus if you put it into a square footage per person, it's much less because I'm watering a small part of land. I'm not watering for the 25 people that live there. Same thing for our 5-plex. It's very small land. So the water consumption is much less versus, at a 5-plex, that water consumption is less than what I pay at my personal house. So it's really more, it's conserving quite a bit more water. If 5 people in that 5-plex each had their personal home, watered their grass, flowers, whatever they did, if you look at the numbers per that, it's just mathematical equation. So that's how it works for me. I'm not disputing anything that you said, and I appreciate you telling it at a factual level, but I just wanted to give my perspective as a landlord.
That sounds good. And we
How about this, that's the water part, how about the flushing, the sewer aspect, is that different too? You think?
Depends on how much you go to the bathroom, counselor.
I think what you're saying is the rate is the same per cubic foot or cubic centimeter, whatever you do, whether it's an apartment or whether it's at home. It just depends on how much you use it.
And here's what we'll do, so you can have a more recent, relevant, maybe with a new build, because there's been a few new complexes of maybe greater than 20. If I think that's what you were talking about, is some of these larger complexes. We'll send the council a typical residential bill. And I think our typical residential bill this last year for water and wastewater was just over $51 a month. And then we can give you what, we'll try to pick like a 20 or 30 unit, and then we can break that down by the unit to give you a perspective. How does that sound?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll leave the addresses off. We'll just give a perspective. But thank you, Counselor, for yours.
She volunteered one of her properties.
Yes.
I heard that.
Okay.
She volunteered one of her properties. I heard that.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much.
Director. Very informative, as you can tell. Okay, next on the agenda is something important to all of us, is our National Citizen Survey. And Mr. Jim David, our Operations Manager, is here with us.
Good afternoon, Council. In January of this year, 3,000 Sioux Falls residents were randomly selected to participate in the National Citizen Survey. This survey, which has been conducted now on 5 separate occasions since 2008, asks residents to rate their satisfaction with various city services and quality of life characteristics. I'm happy to report that we had a response rate of 29% this year, which is right in line with 2015's response rate of 30%. My presentation today will focus on a general overview of the survey results, but for those interested in more detail, the full survey results are available on SIRE and the Citizen Survey webpage. A direct link to this page is available on the city's homepage. When it comes to our city's livability, residents have consistently rated Sioux Falls very, very high. In fact, in this chart, you'll see that 88% rate our overall quality of life in Sioux Falls as good or excellent. This is right in line with the previous 2 surveys. 91% rate Sioux Falls positively as a place to live, which is again right in line with the previous surveys. And then the overall feeling of safety was rated positively by 77%. Safety in their neighborhood was rated positively by 95%. And as a neighborhood, as a place to live, 83% in 2017. Continuing on livability, if we look at affordable housing, we do see that that has dropped almost 10 points since 2013. It's at 45% this year. Housing has remained fairly stable at 67%. New development favorability is at 78%. A place to retire has grown about 6% since 2013 at 67%. And a place to raise children has been fairly consistent at around 89%. Mobility, overall ease of travel has increased to 77%. Travel by car is at 72% this year. Travel by public transportation did drop by a few percentage points. Travel by bicycle has increased by 9% since last year, and traffic flow has seen an increase of 3% since last year. Street repair has dropped from 45% in 2013 to 28% this year. Street cleaning has also decreased to 49%. Snow removal has decreased to 63%. Traffic signal timing has remained fairly stable from last year at 47%. And bus or transit services is at 56%, which is fairly similar to what it was in 2013. If we look at the economy, right now as a place to work is at 82%, which is a 4% increase from 2013. Employment opportunities has increased quite substantially since 2013. And a vibrant downtown, our commercial area, which would include the commercial areas throughout the city, has seen a 5% increase. Shopping opportunities has also increased by that same amount from last year. And cost of living has gone up by about 5% since 2015. I didn't include this, but the overall economic health was ranked positively by 82%, matching last year's result. The favorable response rates to our local economy continue to be one of the strongest in the country. In fact, the City of Sioux Falls was awarded the Voice of the People Award in the area of economy last year for its rating when it comes to the local economy. If we look at governance, services provided dropped slightly from last year, about 3% to 78%. Customer service is up by 5% from last year. The value of services for taxes paid has dropped slightly from last year, 5% from 2013 to 62%. And the overall direction of the city is down slightly by 3% in 2017. Confidence in city government is also down slightly by 3% to 59%. I should point out that the margin of error in this survey is 3%. City services, police have seen a 6% increase in their favorability. Crime prevention remains stable at 71%. Traffic enforcement is at 65%. Fire has remained consistently high at 97%. And ambulance did drop to 84% compared to last year. Drinking water, consistently high. Sewer services, also high at 84%. City parks did see a nice bump from last year at 89%. Recreational programs, also a slight increase from last year. And then health services also remains fairly positive and stable at 84%. If we look at one of the custom questions, and I should point out that each survey allows the local city to formulate what questions they want to ask. The other questions are template questions. And what was chosen for this survey was what you see here when it comes to priority areas for the tax dollar. And it says, please rate the importance of the city investing existing tax dollars over the next 2 years in the following. And as you see here, streets was widely favored at 93%, with 55% saying it's essential. Traffic flow, 47%, total 97% important. Public safety, which was the second when it comes to most essential for existing tax dollars at 54%, 89%. And then it goes down with job growth, public health services, recycling, affordable workforce housing, parks, downtown parking, and public transportation busing. When we look at transportation funding, which has consistently received a lot of attention from respondents, repairing or maintenance of city streets is very high at if I do my math, 98%, I believe. Construction of new major streets in the city, also very consistently high. Existing sidewalks, repair or replacement of existing sidewalks, construction of new sidewalks, public transportation and busing, bicycle system, and at the very end, expansion of city bike lanes on city streets. This is another question that was fairly new. It actually was new. It was just added in this survey. And it asked, to what extent, if at all, do you think each of these health behaviors and issues is a current concern of Sioux Falls? Distracted driving was at 60% for a major concern, and total of 89%. Drug abuse not far behind at 57% for a major concern. Alcohol abuse at 37%, 80% overall. Mental health, 36% major concern, and 78% overall. Domestic abuse, total 77%. Sexual assault, dating violence, 74%. Suicide at 62%. And then at the end, tobacco use and abuse at 56% was a major concern. And I should point out that all of these items were presented to the survey recipients, so they did not add these. These were given to them, and they rated how they felt on each of these items. This is also a question that has been asked in previous years. However, it was amended this last go around to add in workforce development, but the results are pretty much the same. Strongly agree is at 30%. Last survey time in 2015 was 31%. Somewhat agree was also very consistent with the previous survey go around. So fairly almost universal agreement for tax dollars being used for economic growth and also for workforce development. There's a lot of data here, but I'd be happy to answer any of your questions when it comes to survey.
Are there questions for Mr. David? Okay, Councilor Erpenbach.
I guess, there is a lot of data, and thank you, Mr. David, for presenting it so concisely. The booklet is, 100 pages or whatever it is. Is it available online? Can folks just go and look at it yet?
It is. If you go to siouxfalls.org to the homepage, there is a link to the National Citizen Survey webpage, and all that information is on there. Plus, it's on SIRE too, so it's out there.
Well, I point that out because we rely on this so much as a council. We're very often coming back and quoting this over time, so folks need to understand that it is important to us. So I appreciate your work on it.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Erickson?
I just want to echo that as well and say thank you for your work on this. We appreciate the dissecting that you and Bixler also do in regards to some of the information, and we look forward to going through it in more detail over the time. So thanks for your work.
And as I remember, this is something that we have kind of set on the budget and on the agenda for every 2 years now instead of every year. Since I've been on the council, that's the way it's been. And so we'll do this again in 2019, and that way we can keep track of how many, or if we're doing what we said we want to do. I think it's really interesting that they commended us for having 29% return. That is phenomenal, as I understand it, on a survey of this form. So I want to thank the citizens of Sioux Falls for taking this seriously, to tell us what's going on, what they think is right, what they think is wrong, and to help us in governing. So,
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, one more, Councilor?
One more. We were just having a side conversation. It's something that always comes up, because if you look at that, one of the items you pull out is always street repair. It's dropping dramatically every year, right? And this survey consistently goes out around the 1st of January, which is the worst time of year for streets in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so I wonder, and I think I may have asked this before and forgotten the answer, but why do we not do it, send it out late summer, early fall, when all the streets are virtually brand new? Is there a reason we do it the time of year we do?
Yeah, I think it's to try to get a trend line, because if you use, let's say, July or December or September, it's going to differ just because of what you're saying. And so you try to look at those trend lines, because in the previous years that it was also sent out at this time, so at least you're seeing a trend. And so yeah, you might get some some negativity towards street repair or snow removal because of the time period, but at least you can see, is it increasing or is it decreasing? And so maybe the point is not to look at the percentage with some of these, but to look at the overall trend line over the years.
Well, then, point well taken, because it is dropping.
Yep, Councilor Kiley.
Could you repeat once again, what's the cost of the survey?
It's about $25,000.
5,000. I mean, it would be interesting to follow through with what Councilor Erpenbach, and I do know that you're throwing in another variable into the equation by doing it instead of late winter, late fall. But it would give you, maybe you could operate it as a control group and an experimental group, and get a good comparison as to see just what impact the season has on the perception of streets. And it might be at some point in time wise for Public Works to consider doing that, just to see.
It could be one of those items that we have been doing it every 2 years, but there's nothing in stone that says it has to be done every 2 years. And maybe in 2018, it's done during the fall, and just to see if there is what that variable would be. And so we could do 2018, 2019. It's 25,000, and maybe it's well worth just to see what happens.
Keep everything exactly the same except for the timing.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what it is, although I seem to think that construction season, it's either construction season or pothole season around here. So we could hit the construction season, they're going to give us the same result, because Louise and 49th is all torn up.
And that could also affect it if you have a high-profile road construction project, like right now with Louise Avenue going on, and I think East Arrowhead Parkway is going to be coming online here too. So that could affect the results. But like
Seventh
the
Street's
point,
gonna be up there, and, yeah.
the point that was made before, when Louise Avenue is done, people are going to be very impressed, and they're going to be very impressed with Arrowhead Parkway, and so maybe that would be an opportunity to see if, here's the results, what's your response? So,
Councilor Staley.
But, Councilor Erpenbach, were you saying that people are becoming happier with streets? Oh, because you said, yeah, because I was.
I just say that they're, in the fall, when all the orange cones come down before the snow falls, there's that just really like 2 or 3 days where the streets are just beautiful, right?
Okay.
And so that's when the survey needs to come out. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but looking at, we've gone from 45% of people saying that 45% of the people said fair and good. Now we got 45% said it was good. Now we have 28% that are saying it's good, right? That's what it's saying, right?
true, yes, that's correct. Those that said good and excellent.
Satisfaction has gone
dropped.
down. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, one more.
Yes.
And you also bring up a good point there too with the location of some of these major repairs and the need for them. Do we have a way of tracking the location of the respondents?
Yeah, if you go in and do a data dive into this, you will see that the respondents and where within the city they're located, they're actually divided by the city council district. And so you can get a good idea. But then again, I mean, for us, we were traveling to the mall area on Saturday, and it was fairly congested on 41st Street. So, you have a bad experience like that, you're going to be dinging the survey, of course. So,
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. I just find it amazing on these type of studies how consistent we seem to be, and most of it's really good news. And the thing is that's really helpful for us is that when you see anything that drops more than a blip, like even outside that 3% margin of error, it does kind of seem to match up on topics of the day that we're addressing or think need improvement in that. So yeah, it's really helpful. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be getting more information on this as we go along, and we'll be using it in our budgeting and that kind of thing. So, Director Turbeck, did you want to make any comments on this at all? Okay, thank you. I just thought maybe you might want to. Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting, and thank you again, people of Sioux Falls, for doing such a great job of completing the survey and getting us information we need to govern. Councilor.
Just one note before you adjourn, that there is a fiscal committee meeting following this. We are going to take a longer break between this meeting and the fiscal committee. We usually break for 10 minutes. We're going to break for 20 minutes. So more like 5:35 will be fiscal committee starting this evening.
5:35 fiscal committee meeting. We are adjourned.